Welcome back to 52 Moments, where I answer things like,
Tell me about your childhood.
or,
What is your malfunction?
or even,
Why are you so wonderful and magical?
as best I can. Along the way, I hope you'll learn more about me. So let's get to it. This episode is called For Science, and I'm just going to talk about all the nerdy shit I did as a kid. So, I first discovered science fair in grade 5. We were all assigned partners. It was a group project kind of thing. So Elaine and I did something about magnets, I believe. But that got me my very first science fair ribbon and certificate, and I was kind of hooked after that. So the next year, I went on to do a project called Something from Nothing, the Vacuum, in which I built out of brass scraps a vacuum pump. I wish I still had that pump, but it's long ago been repurposed for other things. Um, but I was able to, it had a fitting on the front so that I could attach a 2-liter bottle and suck all the air out of that and show how a vacuum would compress a 2-liter bottle. And so, because I had something kind of showy, that actually allowed me to make it to the regional fair, which was held up at UVic. And it's always held the week of the spring reading break. So there aren't a lot of other students around. It's just, but you get this screaming group of of young kids all being nerdy about science. So that was my first experience of the regional fair, and they make a whole weekend out of it. It is like, it's different now because of funding cuts through the schools. Not as many schools participate, and those that do, the last time I went, there was let's just say an influx of Christian themed science fair projects, which shouldn't exist because that's basically a contradiction in terms. There was things about like trying to prove how Jesus could turn water into wine. It's like, dudes, no, you don't want to prove miracles. That's not how it works. Also, kind of impossible to prove. So, anyway, so I don't go to them anymore. I did for a lot of years, even as a grown up, go and support the kids and ask questions because that's the fun part. I mean, not every kid is going to believe that, but for me, that was the fun part. It was like getting to talk nerdy shit with people who cared about nerdy shit. So, um, with going to the regional fair on the Friday, you get to set everything up, and then they had like a Dr. Zonk show. So that was fun and exciting. And on the Saturday, it was kind of open to the public, and there was judging, and there was all sorts of questions and activity. And, you know, you kind of had free reign of the vending machines, which for a teen or a tween is kind of a fun thing. Um, and yeah, you're just running around the Elliott building like an idiot, but trying to stay close to your project so you could answer the questions like when the judges came by. And then on the Sunday, they handed out the awards and did a wrap up, and then you packed up and cleared out of there. But it's a fun weekend. And I went 4 times I made it to regionals. So grade 6, grade 8, grade 10, and grade 11. Grade 8, I did an electronics project called Light Conversation was the title of my project, which everyone misread as light conservation. And it's like, no, I'm not trying to save light. I'm trying to send audio via a light beam, which I did. It translated the audio signal into a light signal that was then received and translated back. I don't know how I did it. I went into Radio Shack and I bought a lot of bits and pieces and I made it work. And back then I totally understood how it worked. I don't understand now. But I didn't win anything because I probably wasn't all that articulate in explaining how I had done it, which is probably why I can't remember it now. I don't remember what my project was in grade 9. I just remember I didn't make it to the regionals. I also don't remember what my grade 7 project was. But again, didn't make it to the regionals, doesn't matter. Grade 10 and 11, I became obsessed with like neuropsychology. That was for that brief period of about 2.5 years. That's what I wanted to be. So I stopped wanting to be a teacher and wanted to be a neuropsychologist until I realized how much biology I would have to take, and I gave up at that point. But I did very well with the projects, even though I didn't do the best job of managing a project with human subjects either time. My controls were not very well controlled. And that's partly because I didn't have a lab to do this in. I was basically at the mercy of a few science teachers and English teachers who were willing to let me come into their classroom and sort of hijack it for a portion of the class. So in grade 10, I specifically was focusing on memory. And specifically, I was working on whether people recalled things better through text or images. I mean, now I know that people are just wired differently, and for some people, A is going to be true, and for some people, B. But back then, I was convinced that more people were visual than text. And so I created this test where I had objects on a tray. And then for the next test, I had the names of those objects on the tray. And so I was testing groups of people based on their so I would put the tray out, let them have a look at it for however long, 30 seconds, 60 seconds, whatever it was, then take it away and ask them to write down what they remembered. And then I sort of counted the percentage of each. Now, again, this is where I say my control was out, because essentially I just kind of didn't have a zero group in there at all. Like I didn't have the same students tested for both, and I also didn't have enough students tested. But the general idea and the way I went about trying to prove my hypothesis was enough to get me, let's see, I think that one was 2nd place. Nope, that was 3rd place. Sorry. So that was enough to get me 3rd place in the senior division. So, yeah, shiny little plaques. And I'm going to hang these plaques on my wall because, like, what are they doing in a box? The following year, I again returned to the idea of memory, but this time I was obsessed with how people's ability to recall was affected by interruptions. So in one test, they had no interruptions, and they were allowed to go through and just study and then recall. And in the next one, they were given a task of doing like just stupid basic math questions, but it kept taking their attention away from what they were supposed to be memorizing. And obviously the sort of multitasking interruptions, they did lose a lot of the recall ability. And that one got me 2nd in the seniors, which was not enough to make it to the nationals, but that was the closest I got. And after grade 11, I didn't do any more science fairs. But just knowing that I was very well versed in how the scientific method worked, in how to build a hypothesis, how to try and prove that, all that kind of stuff, that served me well through life. And also really understanding how limited data makes for really questionable results. Which is why now when I look at any kind of thing that says, oh, this leads to, X leads to Y, it's like, how many people did they test on that? And if it's like fewer than, like, I know what a statistically significant number is going to be, but like if they just talk to 120 people about their dietary things, that's not enough. It's not a big enough sample, no matter how you slice it. So, if they were specifically targeting vegans, maybe, but I still think 120 is a pathetic sample size. So, if you get 12 different studies that each studied 120 and all come out with the same response, then you're getting a better sample size. But even then, like, statistics can be wrong. There's always outliers. So, yeah, science fair was a big part of my school life. I never, like, aside from that 2-year span where I was really obsessed with neuropsychology, going into sciences was never something I wanted to do for a living. It was just something that super fascinated me. I grew up watching Cosmos and all sorts of Nova programs and a lot of science nerd stuff. And my parents were always ready and willing to help me test hypotheses. Their answer was frequently, I don't know, let's find out. And because of that, like, I carried that through as a parent as well. And so my kid and I were always testing their hypotheses. It's like, well, I don't know what happens if you don't water your plant for 6 weeks. Let's find out. Well, gee, the plant died. Wonder why. Um, but I still love to see that, because when you can see the results of something and know exactly why it happened, it sort of settles into your brain in a different way than if you're just reading about it or taking someone else's word for it. And I just think science is so important to be taught in schools and to be taught well. And yeah, if your school is looking at cutting science fair out, talk to them. I know that a lot of kids don't have time these days or don't want to make the time, but there are definitely still nerds out there who are going to be super keen on this kind of thing. And if whatever I can do to support them, whatever you can do to support them, I think it's super important, because we need scientists in the world. And that's another thing you know about me. Thanks. I hope you'll come back and learn more next time. Bye.